Welcome to the My Personal Football Coach Youth Soccer Player Development Podcast, episode 34 with Ross Embleton.
Welcome to MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Soccer Player Development Podcast. Discover all the secrets, hints and tips about soccer player development and soccer coaching from some of the leading figures in world soccer. Here's your host, Saul Isaacson-Hurst.
Hi guys, welcome back to another show. Before we get into our top guest this week, just want to say, obviously, look, this is the first show of 2019. I want to say a big thank you for all your guys' support over the last year in 2018, which has been an amazing year for myself and for My Personal Football Coach. Remember, if you are enjoying the podcast, please do leave a review. It really does help. I really appreciate it. But I just want to say thanks again for all your support. We're making big strides in improving player development, improving the quality of coaching around in world soccer. Look, I see it on social media now. The amount more the increase in the amount of people talking about 1v1 now. I remember I've been banging on about it for years and years, and people saying there was no such thing as 1v1. And now I think we have actually together we're changing the narrative. We're changing the discourse, and people embracing 1v1 and ball mastery, and it's improving, and our players are going to be getting better. And I'm really proud of that. Our movement and how that's progressing. So thanks very much. And obviously, look, the ball mastery program, the app's been going from strength to strength. The first full year, we've got thousands of players all around the world in over 30 different countries improving themselves. So that's really going from strength to strength, and that is now the world's number one ball mastery app. So that's going good. And also, look, we've got the Coaches Pass, which goes from strength to strength. Obviously, we're releasing sessions each week there from myself and from coaches from all around the world. We've got sessions from Dynamo Zagreb, got sessions from West Ham, from Tottenham, from all the different clubs around the world. So regular sessions there, and obviously skills and hints and tips. And the recently released e-learning course as well, the 1v1 ball mastery, has gone down fantastic. Keep getting lots of messages about people from that, so really proud about that as well. And obviously finally our club partnership, obviously we've got Wolverhampton Wanderers and LA Galaxy on board. We've got some federations interested as well, but we've got lots and lots of just grassroots youth clubs around the world who are supporting player development, supporting their coaches in taking their games to the next level. So really proud to be involved with all of you guys and supporting player and coach development around the world, and I'm just really thrilled to be a part of that. So heading out to Chicago tomorrow for the convention. So if you're there, you see me, come and say hello. We want to connect with as many people as possible. With My Personal Football Coach, we have a stall there this year, so that's really exciting. And some big things coming. And don't forget, obviously, also, if you haven't yet, check out the Inside the Academy episode 2, Inside the Dynamo Zagreb Academy, my newest release on the Inside the Academy YouTube channel about the Dynamo Zagreb Academy, one of the top academies in world football. I've had a lot of feedback about that, and I'm so excited because we've just recently had some other clubs to accept to say they're going to do it in the coming months. And we've got some big academies coming, so that's going to be a really exciting series as well. So lots going on as always. Now to our guest. Our guest is someone I've known for many years, and his name's Ross Embleton. He's really he's had an amazing career already in the game. And you talk about football people who are real football people. He really is someone who is a football person. He lives and breathes the game. He's actually spent his whole, not only his working career, but also as a youngster playing at the Leyton Orient Academy. He's really been in football ever since he's been able to. Really has an amazing career. He's been at clubs, for instance, started off at Leyton Orient in the academy and as a player, then moved into coaching as academy manager. Worked at Spurs when I was there, supporting the development centres with the younger age groups. Moved on to work at Bournemouth with the youth team. Also worked at Norwich in recruitment. Also worked in Swindon in the first team, and also now as his current role as assistant manager at Leyton Orient, who are back on their way up, thankfully, back to where they belong in the football league. So an amazing journey. I tell you what, this is like really, for me, this is one of the most engaging podcasts I've ever done in terms of literally. I didn't want to. I couldn't stop. You can tell it's a bit of a long one. I was sort of carried away because he's got such an amazing journey to talk about, and so many amazing experiences at all those different levels. So really fortunate, I think, for him to being able to really work from literally the youngest age groups to the first team, and all those experiences which have really helped him get to where he is today, and obviously be a top coach now, working under Justin Edinburgh at Leyton Orient. They're doing really well. So if you're aspiring coach, this one really is not to be missed. It's got a lot of gold in there, so I really can't recommend it enough. And I'm really fortunate he came on the show to share his journey. So without further ado, let's get into the show. So Ross Embleton, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, Saul.
So just give us a little bit of a brief rundown of your playing and coaching experience up to this point.
From a playing perspective, quite limited, if I'm honest. Like everybody else, started out as a young player, trying to live out my big dreams, but realistically I wasn't quite good enough, so I was released from Leyton Orient at the age of sort of 15, 16, which looking back for me was obviously quite a big thing for me in my career, because that was pretty much the time that I started coaching. Really, when I look back, really beneficial period for me in terms of the work that I did, heavily into football in the community, working with a real variation of groups and standards and qualities of players, going into primary schools. After schools was probably my priority at that time, and the bulk of my work, but a lot of the additional things I also did was working on housing estates and a lot of tough places, people with tough backgrounds in and around sort of East London. So in terms of looking back at the type of coaching that I did at that time, it was restrictive in terms of some of the qualities of players that I worked with, but it taught me a huge amount, and like I say, something I'd always look back on as a real value in terms of the way that I really learnt to manage difficult characters, how I learnt to work with real varied numbers, different qualities of players, so that you had to really pitch my session at different levels and for different types of situations. So it's something that I look back on with a real value. Off the back.
So then just go briefly then. So then you worked. What was your role at Orient, and then just go through.
So Leyton Orient's background was football in the community. That, like I say, and went on to sort of manage some of the programs that I was coaching on back then. And then I started to, like a lot of other people, really keen on my coaching. I spent a lot of time viewing sessions at the club's Centre of Excellence at the time. So I had, the opportunity to watch a lot of good people. First time I came into contact with people like Chris Ramsey. So I got to watch some really good people coach and learn a lot from those people. My dad was actually a coach at the Centre of Excellence at the time as well, and people like my dad and other experienced coaches that were working at the time really taught me a lot about your personality, making sessions fun and enjoyable, even though it was what you'd perceive or call an elite level of football coaching. It was I've learned it was really important to make sure that your sessions continue to be an enjoyable environment for kids to come and play in. So that was a really good thing, and it developed on there for me really. And I ended up taking age groups at the club's academy, then managing the younger age groups. I suppose now in EPPP terms it would have been the foundation phase. And then sort of moving through that quite quickly, I ended up within a sort of 3 or 4 year period changing personnel, people moving on. I ended up managing that program. So I was Centre of Excellence manager at the age of sort of 24, 25. So it was a huge position for someone of my age. Real big and real positive opportunity for me to to manage a big program. So therefore, it wasn't just about my coaching; it was more me learning about how to managing processes, how to manage a group of coaches. A lot of coaches with a lot of experience that were a lot older than me. So it taught me a lot of different skills on top of my coaching. Really, did that for a 3 year period before I moved on and left and went to work at Tottenham Hotspur as academy integration manager. My title was. Obviously, know that I was working with yourself during that period, and part of that role was to manage the, I suppose, pre-academy and help out with managing the younger age groups at the academy. And then also alongside that was to look after the club's development centres and all the coaches that worked within that programme. So quite a big change of direction in terms of the age group of players that I was working with. Another good opportunity to work with, as a group of coaches that were sort of quite young and aspiring and up and coming coaches that were working in that environment at the time. So it was a change in terms of the personnel that I was managing, but again, another good experience. And I think the big thing, and selfishly, that gave me was a real opportunity to go to work every day with some people with huge experience. Obviously, John McDermott's record speaks for himself. Alex Inglethorpe was somebody that I knew from working at Leyton Orient previously, but he was always someone that had a real impression on me. Again, touching on Chris Ramsey earlier, working with someone like Chris, and then also other people around that as well. Dean Rashtrick, who had a wealth of experience, not just about being out coaching, but how to run an academy and manage those huge academies that people like that have been working around. So that was selfishly a real good experience for me. And then obviously at the latter period of that, someone like Brian Klug, people like that came to the club and the academy there was real good opportunity for me to learn and develop by watching those people coach, but also touched on it before, but how they work with people and how they manage different people.
And so then your next top, we'll just fly through these, and then we're going to go back in there and tuck in. Next
ones were next opportunity there was I moved on to manage the under-18s, a youth team at AFC Bournemouth. That was at a period when the club had been taken over, so it was a club that was on the up, and obviously it's gone on to become the club that it is. During that time, Eddie Howe came back from Burnley as the manager, so that was someone real value to work alongside and experience. I wasn't there for a particularly long period, which is a huge shame because I loved that job. But I came away and spent some time at Norwich City in recruitment. If I'm totally honest, it's not and isn't something that I look back on with a fond memory. But again, I suppose another experience that really gives you an opportunity to move on and learn on a completely different side of the game. Probably learned to watch football a little bit differently than I ever have done before, and probably have done since, in terms of looking at individual players and travelling around a lot of different clubs to see what they do, how they work, how they play. So I suppose in the longer term, it was of real benefit and showed me something else to that side of the game that I'd perhaps not experienced before. Once I left Norwich, I went back to Spurs and managed a 16 to 18s college program for a period, so it got me back out on the grass and coaching much more regularly. Something that I really enjoyed. Some real tough times, some real difficult individuals that we had in the program, but we built that up from a group of 24 to, by the time I left 18 months later, to a program that ran 92 16 to 18 year olds. So it was something that I really enjoyed doing. Spent a lot of time going abroad and working in China and America at the same time in some of the programs that Spurs were trying to build up there. And then a drastic jump, really. I had an opportunity that someone that I'd spent a lot of time growing up around, Martin Ling, had been Leyton Orient manager. He appointed me as the Centre of Excellence manager at Leyton Orient. He went back into management as the manager at Swindon Town, and he took me with him to go and work as his first team coach. There was 3 of us on the staff there, so it was obviously an incredible jump to go from running a pretty much grassroots college program to going and working with full-time professional players. So it was a massive jump for me. I spent just over 18, I think just under 2 years as Swindon assistant manager and first team coach, and now find myself back where I started at Leyton Orient, and I'm assistant manager.
So my first response to that would be wow. It's like that's a pretty impressive football CV. I mean, listen, you pretty much lived you have lived your whole career in the game, right? I mean, and obviously that comes with his ups and downs. I mean, that's a pretty impressive and amazing different sorts of experiences you got there across the game there.
That's the biggest thing that I take from it. If I'm brutally honest, it hurts sometimes that I've had so many different clubs and so many different places that I've worked at, in terms of, you look back sometimes look down at your CV and think, it looks like I've jumped from club to club. But obviously circumstances in football, as most people would know, change so quickly. And when you put yourself into a situation of working at, I suppose, that end where it becomes a little bit more cutthroat, then obviously your circumstances and your opportunities can change. So I suppose taking the positives out of it, I can look down now and I can say I've had a real variation. I've experienced pretty much most sides of the game, and at various different levels, and it, you know, I suppose now I have to look at it with a proud view rather than one that disappoints me at the fact that there's been so many different clubs on that CV.
Well, I mean, listen, you got to be think yourself fortunate as well in that way that you've been, you know, you've had that, you know, that career in the game, right? I mean, you know, so you've been really fortunate to work at some amazing clubs, some amazing experiences.
Some amazing clubs and some amazing people as well. I mean, my biggest thing for me in what I do when you go to work every day, I think if you can work with good people, and then you can work with good people that have had incredible experiences that are very, very good at your job, then I count myself very lucky. And I think some of those names, first and foremost, that I mentioned in that, you know, off the back of that first question, is fantastic of the things that I can take from those people. I've worked, you know, understandably, like we all have, with people with, you know, those experiences have not been quite so positive, but you can always take something from everyone, every experience, every club that you work with, and I'm proud to know that you know, those people and those experiences have helped me along the way.
I think that's one of the things I miss most about being in an academy, is that being in that environment where you've got those sorts of people around you, where you're surrounded by, you know, world-class coaches, then you're constantly learning and getting ideas from, and, you know, and it's just on your doorstep. I think that's one of the main things I miss from being in those sorts of environments. But I don't want to talk about that. I'm just, let's wind back a bit and then we'll go on to that, your work at the moment. Think about, I mean, that time at Orient then. I mean, you worked your way up into academy manager. I mean, that must be pretty amazing, right? You're a local boy, local lad, come good and running the academy there. What was that like for you personally?
It was daunting to begin with, because I suppose we look at what an academy looks like now, and we hear a lot about EPPP and what, you know, times that coaches have to spend on laptops and things like that. And I went from being somebody that would have been out coaching every minute of every day, or every possible opportunity of every day that I got to be out working with kids and young footballers at the time, to spending a big part of my day and a huge time of my week sat behind a laptop organising how the academy ran. And if I'm honest, brutally honest, in the first few weeks and a month or so, I didn't really have a clue how it worked, and it took me a lot of digging, a lot of clever questioning of different people at different clubs that were in a similar position to me, to start to work out exactly, you know, how it should look, the way that it should look, how best to organise things yourself, you know, and then be able to go out in the evening and still have the same amount of energy to go and work with the players that are sitting underneath your responsibility.
So how much time did you actually get to actually work on the grass then as an academy manager?
In my first season, very, very little. We ran a very basic day release program for the boys to come out of school. So I was fortunate enough that I used to say I could get my fix, if you like, on a Thursday sort of morning and early afternoon, to go and work with those under 16s that were coming out of school and on the verge of getting their scholarships at the time, to go and work with them. So I think that was probably the day that I really prioritised, and I really had the opportunity to be with them, because the youth team manager would therefore go from having sort of, you know, whatever numbers he would have had up to 18 in his squad, and then to add probably another 10 or 12 of those on that day. So we could split the group and have an opportunity to work with Kevin Nugent at the time, and Andy Edwards, who was another really good coach who came to work at the club. And we could manage that group together. So that was the time where I really got the opportunity to be out on the grass. But what I then lost the opportunity to do was go and do the same things with the younger players that I'd spent so much time with. By the time I took over the Centre of Excellence, I think from the age of under 8 through to under 15, I'd signed, worked with and recruited every single player pretty much that was at the club, in terms of, you know, working from them when they came in the door at under 8 right the way up until under 15. And then all of a sudden, by the click of the fingers, I'd been given a fantastic opportunity, but actually the bit that I adored and loved so much, you know, doing every day was sort of taken away from me. So it was a bit of a strange situation to be in, but learning on the job every day, making tweaks and changes where I could in order to try to help put things in place that I felt were going to help develop the players better, was something that was extremely interesting, alongside learning a completely different side of administration. I suppose being a little bit more responsible of having to meet with parents and have those sort of situations, and parents that probably looked at me as a little kid who coached their kids to an extent. I'd all of a sudden become that person that was in charge, and they were having to come to me to get the answers that they required. So it was a bit of a strange experience, to be honest, to begin with.
And you just mentioned it there. You talked about answers they required. I mean, we know, we've been in that environment.
Yeah.
I mean, how tough is that? I mean, these guys, these players you've worked with, you signed, you may have known all the way through. How tough is it giving these kids decisions, telling them they're not quite there? I mean, you said you went through it yourself. How'd you cope with that? And, and what are the strategies to support them and obviously support you guys having to make these difficult decisions?
I think, first of all, there's never a nice way of doing it. And it's always, I don't think you can ever say that it's, there's a time in their lives, in their period of being young footballers, when it's easier or harder to take or experience. You sit there in front of that young 18-year-old who's being told that he's not going to get a professional contract, and then 2 years before, you sit down with them as they're about to leave school at an incredibly crucial period in their lives, and telling them that they're not going to get a full-time scholarship is extremely tough. But then at the same time, when you've got a small group of under 8s and you're making a decision where people will say they're being released, or they're being told that they're not quite up to the level, it is ludicrous to have to tell kids of that age what you're coming to that decision. So it was extremely tough whenever we had to do it. I think the biggest thing and a conversation that we always had as a group of staff was, are we making the decision for those players at that period of time that is the best decision for them? Forget about us as a club. Forget about having the best players, having the best groups, having the best potential players to come through. We'll worry about that, and we work with those as we go, and as we work through the weeks and through the season. But are we doing the best by those children? Is it right that we're coming to that decision at whatever age we're having to have that conversation with them and their parents? Is it the right thing by them to let them know that unfortunately that's the decision that the club and the coaches have come to, but ultimately it's the best decision for them? It's not going to be the right environment and the right opportunity for those kids to carry on. And I think obviously everybody makes mistakes, and people get it wrong. And I think that's the biggest part that I've always tried to sell to those young players is, I hope we're making a mistake. I hope you come back and prove us wrong, and live to tell the tale for that little bit longer, and come back a better player from the experience of leaving at the time Leyton Orient Centre of Excellence.
And because it's interesting, I'm just thinking that you've gone through that. I mean, you've been on the other side of the table, haven't you? On that conversation.
Yeah, mine was in a corridor. It wasn't so much in front of a table with my mum and dad sitting next to me. It was actually Chris Ramsey who put his arm around me at the time to say to me, "Oh, by the way, mate, you're not going to be getting a YTS at the end of this season." But it's the game was different back then. It was old fashioned, and people didn't quite know how to deliver those messages. I suppose what we would perceive as being in as much of a professional manner as they have to be held these days. So it's tough, and like I say, I knew very, very late that in terms of, as I was just about to leave school. So I suppose that's something that lives with you. It's an experience that you don't want anybody else to have to go through. So when they are put through that, when you do have to deliver that message, you want to make sure that it's done first and foremost in the most possible, simplest, honest. I think obviously, of course, that you can deliver that for those young players.
And talk a little bit about the surrounding the environment. So I mean, you're there in the middle of East London. You got West Ham on your doorstep. You got Tottenham on the road. You got Arsenal, obviously, we all know, really aggressive with their recruitment. What was it like being in that environment? I mean, was people just coming and raiding you and nicking your players all the time? We
were fortunate then. I suppose now, with, again, touching on EPPP and the way that compensation is set up for clubs at different levels of academies. It wasn't so tight then. It was a lot more. I'm not saying there was protection, but it wasn't as open in terms of people coming in and watching your players. You could be a little bit more protective of your own environment. I suppose the rules weren't in place that the EPPP sets now, that we was allowed to pretty much shut our gates behind us on the way into games, and if a scout was in there, you were pretty much given the backing to kick them out. So it wasn't quite as easy for those clubs to come in and threaten your players. And when they did, it was then a case of, if they're going to take them off our hands, it was a battle. It was a discussion to get what we owed, if you like. And I don't mean to make that sound like the players are put at that under those constraints of being worth an amount of money, but it was, as a club, as a smaller club, we were a little bit more protected back then. Did you have like relationships with clubs who maybe they came through the front door? Yeah, we did. Yeah, people, good people at other clubs definitely approached us a little bit more, directly, and we could build those relationships. And I think the biggest thing that when players are moving from one club to another is obviously that the player is the most important thing, to make sure that they're going to get the right experience. Sometimes them walking out of one club into another doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the right thing by them. They may feel like they're stepping up and having a bigger opportunity lay ahead of them, but ultimately it's about making sure that process is managed smoothly. So there was certainly a number of clubs that went on to sign a number of our players that was managed well. I think from a recruitment perspective, in terms of going toe to toe with those bigger clubs, we know that we didn't have the manpower out on the ground watching games. We had no scouts out watching games of football. But what we did have, we'd had years of working in football in a community in the local area, where that came full circle for me, really, to be able to call upon the relationships that I'd built with all the local schools. Kids that on the housing estate programs that I touched on right at the beginning, we had access to players that hadn't yet hit grassroots football. Some kids couldn't afford to go and play grassroots football. They didn't have the family support behind them to get to grassroots football every week. So the only access they had to having a kickabout throughout the week was on a Leyton Orient community program course. So what that meant was we were seeing players. We had relationships with schools that we got ahead of the game. Teachers would flag up players coming in. At times we had a lot of trialists in our groups. That meant we were all consistently looking at players, but that was the way that we had to go about running our centre of excellence, because we had no real scout network out on the ground, or what you would perceive as the traditional scout network out there with a man in his coat approaching kids on a Saturday or Sunday morning. We never had the opportunity of doing that, but what we did have was we got ahead of the race, and we managed to get some very, very good groups and very, very good individuals into our program at a very young age. And then what I would say I really prided myself on was that we felt as though once we had those kids, they would enjoy the environment enough to not want to go anywhere.
Interesting. So then your next challenge comes along. You're moving up the road to North London to Spurs. How did that come about?
Probably at a good time for me. Like, I'd spent 3 years in that role, and I felt that I hadn't had the opportunity, because it was all forever foot to the floor in terms of the way that I was working. I really felt that I was evolving as a coach, because I wasn't coaching as much, or as somebody in that position. I wanted to become better at my job selfishly, and I felt that a lot of the stuff that I was doing, the things that I was implementing were, if I could get on a course every now and again, or if I could, not as much access then as you do now to reading things on the internet and picking up sessions and ideas off of the wonderful access that we've got these days. I didn't quite have that opportunity to do that at the time, so I started to feel as though I needed something else. I probably needed to step away from Leyton Orient, because I'd been there forever. and needed an opportunity to go elsewhere. And David Dodds was leaving Tottenham at the time to go to Watford, I believe.
Reading, he went Reading. He went to Reading.
It was Reading. He'd been at Watford before that. So Dave was in the academy integration role, as you would have known. You would have worked closely with him before. They're a really good guy, and I'd been over a few times to Spurs in the development centres on a Friday evening. When the kids were sort of out coming to the end of that period of, I think it was under 11s or under 12s, which was when the development centres programme stopped at Tottenham. They used to give me the opportunity to come over and play some friendlies, but also had the opportunity to offer children the opportunity to come to Leyton Orient if they were not going to be kept on at that programme that Spurs were running. So I had real good contact with Dave Dodds. I'd worked previously with Grant Cornwell, who was the head of the foundation at Tottenham. So as that opportunity come up, like everybody else, that job was advertised, and I applied for that pretty quickly. And it was, like I say, it was quite a drastic change in terms of going from managing the overall programme to dropping down to working with more specific age groups again. But like I say, the opportunity for me to go and work at such a fantastic club, what I thought was a magnificent facility at Chigwell at the time. All of those things added up to it being, what I felt was going to be the next stage of my career to help me develop.
So, what were the main differences you found between the two clubs there?
A number of them, really. First of all, the amount of people. Not saying that that's the biggest one, but that was a real big draw for me to go and work with huge amount of people, both full time and part time, and have the opportunity to work with new facing people that some that I did know, but others that I didn't know quite so well. That was massive in terms of going into work with that every day, and quickly found out that Chigwell wasn't a big enough training ground for Tottenham, and they were obviously planning the building and the relocation that they've gone on to do. I think the real identity that the club had as an academy, the direction that they wanted to go in terms of how they developed the players, the way that people were, like yourself and the good coaches that were around at the time, that real desire and the way that people worked, the real focus on the individual qualities and the individual techniques of the players was something that really excited me.
So just talk a little bit about that, obviously, because the listeners won't have been lucky enough to work in that environment. What do you mean by that? And tell us, because people might just all assume that all academies do things the same way in terms of their syllabus, but just tell us a little bit about the unique things that were going on at Tottenham at the time.
I think it was the individual was the biggest thing, the focus on the individual and the real desire from everybody at the club, certainly within the foundation phase, to really create exciting, energetic, dynamic young footballers. I felt there was a real, and I suppose I was in this to begin with, there was a real misunderstanding from a lot of people that Tottenham just wanted to create dribblers. I think what I soon learnt quickly being in that environment was it was about trying to develop players that were comfortable with the ball. It was trying to develop players that were comfortable with the ball but were capable of protecting and shielding the ball, staying on the ball, being able to manipulate the ball to get themselves into, get their bodies into different positions and face up opponents and step away from opponents whilst always having that real control and manipulation of the ball. And then whatever player you were going to become over the longer term, you still always had that real foundation and that base that philosophy gave you. 9 times out of 10, when you were working with the real tiny ones, the under 7s and under 8s, it did become about people driving at people 1v1, but it consistently gave those young players that were coming through that ability to be comfortable on the ball and to try to dominate the opponent, whether that be to go past him, to pass it past him, to combine to get the other side of people. Those real basic fundamentals that were drilled into the boys week in, week out in a real energetic and fun environment was, for me, something that really stood out. And I think what I saw quickly in the early stages, while still sort of observing everything and trying to get to grips with it, was there was that real identity when you went to play other teams. and other clubs, and they of course had their own philosophies and the real desire to go and develop their players that they did. But I felt that we always had that little edge and that little extra bit of energy and excitement in the way that our players went out to try to perform in games. I think it did for me as well. Again, touching on the younger age groups, but what it really did was that philosophy then took away that the end product to a game. That you must win, you must not get beat, you must not make mistakes. All the things that come with how a lot of people start out thinking that their coaching and their team should look. I think what that did was that drew a lot of that away, because the whole week, every session, every time the boys come in to have contact with our coaches and the environment that we had, it was about what they did as an individual, how they could impose themselves on a game, how they could best execute the techniques and the skills within their training sessions, if you like.
Yes, I think you made a great point there. Just previously, when you talked about they're having that edge over teams, looking at that individual, brilliance, if you like, that dynamism, especially in the foundation phase. And that's what I don't know whether you have to work in that environment to appreciate or see that. But when we used to play other teams, I used to see that individually our players were so much better, so much more exciting, and maybe win as many games, but technically and individually you'd be like leaps ahead, and you'd almost wonder why for instance the FA's not getting on this and saying let's enhance this, make this, let's get everyone doing this sort of work.
And yeah, certainly, and I think you listen to people's opinions on our academy's work, and the fact that kids go into academies at 5 and 6 years old, and you hear a lot of the time there's a negative viewpoint on that. But what I really learned quickly from that environment at Spurs was the kids were so infused by that philosophy that it created so much energy in the sessions. When you think back, Saul, to when we used to do the Thursday nights, we used to combine age groups, and we had the birth bias and all those sorts of things where the coaches had to come up with a theme for the Thursday night games night, if you like. The energy and the enthusiasm, the intensity. I'm not saying that isn't replicated anywhere else. I can't, at the number of clubs I've worked at, I can't say that it was, but I'm sure that the other kids going to the other environments at a lot of other clubs with that same enthusiasm. But that energy that I felt there, I've never experienced anywhere else since or before, because I just really feel that it made kids so much more energetic and dynamic, and for me, coming into that environment, it was so nice to see those kids so happy. I think, like I say, we touch on the fact that they go into these clubs so young now, but if you're creating a free environment where kids can go in and express themselves and they enjoy playing football, then I'm not convinced that there's too much wrong with that. Certainly wasn't winning from what I experienced at Tottenham.
Absolutely, and just thinking about when you were at Spurs there, so obviously a lot of your work was with the younger age groups and working with development centres, and you were sort of making a lot of decisions on the under 8s, if to be signed or not be signed. You definitely had a big influence in that. What was that like though, in terms of, I talked about it earlier in terms of the environment, now you're at Spurs, but I remember Arsenal knocking on our door a lot. They were very aggressive, they used to be into our players a lot, and those years, I mean, what was it like trying to, in that really ultra competitive environment, trying to get these under 8s in when you're competing with Arsenal, Chelsea, obviously across London, really throwing everything at it, and West Ham? What was it like trying being in that role in that environment?
It was tough. It was tough because I found it difficult to adapt to begin with, because I felt come away from Leyton Orient working with kids at times where I was telling them what I felt was a real critical time of their careers at 16 and 18, that they were not going to be full-time professionals, to go in, and the priority in my job being to recruit and try and get the best under 8s into our programme. And I found that tough to begin with, because I felt, is this right? Am I selling them the right thing? Am I making sure that it's going to be the best environment that it can be for them? So that bit was difficult. I always remember our first game against Arsenal, and I couldn't believe how intense everything was. I couldn't believe how we wasn't allowed to go and really play against anybody else in and around the area because everyone was so competitive, and that some kids were coming to Tottenham on a Monday, going to West Ham Tuesday, Watford Wednesday, Arsenal Thursday, Chelsea Friday, and they were out every night of the week training in different environments. I understand why, because you know, as a parent, you'd want the best thing for your child, but I just couldn't believe the level of intensity for, you know, I suppose what we would say now were the best kids in London. It was incredible, and the fight that went on with scouts and people in the door, and this scout telling me that this one needed to be signed and this one was going elsewhere if we didn't do this for him. I found that very, very difficult to deal with for a group of kids that were sort of, you know, 8 or 9 years old. But obviously, at the same time, what we did know and what we go on to learn, and when you look at Tottenham's success now, a lot of those kids that, not necessarily that were signed by me at under 8, but kids that have come through and players that have gone on to, you know, to make their debuts and that sort of thing, they were in and around that environment from 7 or 8 years old. So I totally understand why it is so competitive. I just found it very difficult to get my head around at the time.
You mentioned there the under 8s game. I remember that those the first 8s game we used to play Arsenal after the signing day, and you talked about intensity there. It was a proper derby even at 8.
It was incredible. It was incredible. All the coaches would all be embracing each other, talking to each other before, and then the game would kick off, and it would be.
It was like there was a level of animosity there almost. Like the real wasn't like, you know, even at that time. I think it's changed now specifically. Like there was real. You know, wasn't much love lost between the two academies.
No,
even.
Very. It was something I'd never experienced before, and I'm not convinced it was totally right. Like I say, I think there was some fantastic. I mean, the level of football was incredible. When I think back to that first experience of watching what was going to be Tottenham's under 9s against Arsenal's under 9s, the level of football was outrageous, really. But like I say, it was a very difficult thing, something that I probably never quite got totally to grips with. Of, you know, he was almost having to put a sales pitch together for parents, and that was like I say, where I felt that the real value, or real for me, and a real misunderstanding for a lot of people, coaches, parents, you know, people that were involved in recruitment, we were seen as these people that were trying to create, you know, the new Lionel Messi's or the next Lionel Messi's, and it wasn't. That's where the real misunderstanding of Tottenham's philosophy and that real desire to develop players 1v1, you know, to be 1v1 dominant, whether you're an attacker, whether you're a defender, whether you're a passer, whether you're a dribbler, whether you're a goal scorer or a midfield creator, you know, those real that real strength in philosophy was a huge one.
And you mentioned previously earlier about the sort of people you learnt from. I mean, I remember that environment with all those people, and I mean, what was that like coming into that with so many, you know, unbelievable coaches there? You talk about Chris Ramsey, Alex Inglethorpe, John McDermott, obviously Danny Buck was there. Lots of people, like, you know, just what was that like going into that environment and work and seeing those guys working every day?
Well, it was incredible because, you know, touched on Chris. Chris was a big influence on me because he was my coach when I was 14. So I knew what he was capable of. He's always someone that I, you know, valued highly in terms of picking up the phone and getting different ideas. He'd played a big role in helping us put together a, you know, I'll call it a philosophy. It was a very vague one in comparison to what people are now. But when we were doing that at Leyton Orient, so I was really excited about working with Chris again. And Chris's passion and enthusiasm and his ability to come and work with what you would have seen him doing with Tom Carroll and Harry Kane in the morning, to coming back upstairs and working with Oliver Skipp as a 9-year-old. His enthusiasm to be coaching at the intensity and the level and the quality that he did was very, very difficult to be matched. I think Alex Inglethorpe, very different in terms of the way that they are and the skills and the, you know, level of quality of coaching that they deliver, but both absolute top drawer in the way that they go about it. Alex was very particular in his planning and his reviewing of the sessions that he did. I thought he was very detailed, very calm in the way that he came across working with a variety of different players. And the same with Alex, his love and his passion for coaching was that he would work with the same sort of players that, you know, names that I've reeled off there in the morning and throughout the week. And then on a Friday night, he'd stay and work with our development centre kids and coaches on a Friday night until 8:30, 9 o'clock, whatever time we finished. And so his passion and his enthusiasm and desire to develop players and to be out coaching was for me something that never been able to see matched before or since really. And same with John. John was did probably build a stronger relationship with John as I did the other two people that I mentioned, but in terms of his detail and his, the way that his mind worked was incredible really at times. So some outstanding people to be able to learn from and work from, and like I say, not just from a coaching perspective, it was their their enthusiasm and their desire to constantly be doing it and to constantly be helping develop players of the future.
I think that's I think back to then, it was inspirational really. We're surrounded by those sorts of people, and obviously the people that gone on to do other things I can't, at the time I don't think we realised, I certainly didn't realise how lucky we was. That was my first academy experience. I was really blessed, and I just thought that was the way it was, but surrounded by so many world-class practitioners, it was impossible not to feed off that.
Yeah, and no snobbery in the way that they worked. No thought process, or never got the feeling that anyone was trying to do something to outdo anybody or gain extra brownie points for anything. Everything that they were trying to do, everything that they were solely focused on was the development of the players that they had their hands on at that time. And like I say, whether it was a boy that first turned up at a development centre off the back of grassroots football, or if it was somebody that they felt was going to be John Bostock, Dean Parrott, players that were a real priority for the club at the time, their enthusiasm and in the manner that they worked was outstanding every day. And it was those standards that people like that set that first started to make me realise that there was, how much of a bigger picture it is in terms of, how you want to be perceived, how you want to be looked upon, as you develop as a coach as well. You start to realise, well, hold on a minute, these people are having a huge effect and a huge impact on me. I'd like to be able to be considered in a similar light one day.
Absolutely. So just tell us then, obviously, then opportunity at Bournemouth comes up. How did that come up?
Well, I wasn't coaching enough again, Saul, to be honest, and like I say, I started to wonder and what direction it was that I was going to go in. Was it as E-Triple-P was sort of coming into play? Was I going to be one of those people in a particular role, operations type role where wasn't considered as a coach, but felt like I would have had other strengths in other areas because of what I'd done at Leyton Orient, and then obviously my role at Spurs. And I was really keen to just get coaching a little bit more and have an opportunity to be working with players a little bit more. I knew what my priority in my job was, but didn't feel as though I was able to get out and coach enough. And it was becoming a bit of a vicious circle that people at the club didn't see me as a coach because I wasn't coaching enough. So therefore I couldn't get that access to having contact with players on a regular basis. So the opportunity came up at AFC Bournemouth. They'd had a change of manager. The people that were within the academy had moved up to work with the first team. So an opportunity became available there, and similar to Spurs, really, I went down there for an interview, and it was a big opportunity, a big move. Moved my family down there. I just had my little boy, my second child. So we relocated to Bournemouth, but it was a fantastic opportunity for me to get out and work with under 18s players day to day and be able to start to put in place things that I'd learned over quite a lengthy coaching experience that I'd had by then. But I could start to input what I felt were really important, and the things that I felt I could help to develop players at a club that was really aspiring to get to where it got to.
So tell us a little bit about that then. You're back on the grass. You're working on the 18s. What was that like in terms of practically? Then, like you said, you've almost gone from coaching every day to being more management, and then another sort of admin role, and then you're back on the grass every day. What's that like in terms of? I'm interested, in terms of coming up with fresh ideas for sessions, thinking about your philosophy. Did you take stuff from Spurs or was it stuff from Orient? I mean, what was all that sort of your thinking in them areas?
Very much just the obviously bits from both, really. I think my biggest and the first challenge for me was trying to get an understanding of how best to structure a week. And to some coaches that might sound very, very basic for someone going into work with a youth team, but I wanted to make sure that when do we do obviously every day you go out and you have your warm up and basic structure of a session where you warm up and you have your topics that you want to work on through your game throughout your day. Your small-sided work, but how do you build that up towards the game at the weekend? Because obviously at under 18 level, the game becomes that little bit more, not necessarily result focused, but all of a sudden you're playing in a league. Players are having to start to learn about how to manage games and get results and understand how to win or avoid defeat. Those sorts of things. You're going to be playing in the FA Youth Cup. So how do you structure a week where you continuously develop those players, but also give them the opportunity and get them ready to make sure that they can go and perform in a game as a team at the weekend? And then the flip side of that, what are the physical outcomes? How do we make those players, work to the level where they're consistently improving their various physical outputs that they need from particular sessions, but at the same time matching that up with the technical and tactical aspects as well. So that was something that I really spent a lot of time trying to make sure that I was getting right. And then the flip side of that, and a massive thing for me then off the back of leaving Tottenham, was how do we really individualise their training programmes? When can I put that in? How many afternoons a week can we go back out? How many afternoons based on, the program that was in place for those scholars every day? How do I fit that in to make sure that they're getting what they need technically, tactically and physically throughout the week in their normal sessions, but also to make sure that I really individualise, give them their opportunities to develop their techniques and their deficiencies and their strengths as an individual. I think that was something that was massive for me, the amount of time that I could give them to practice.
So then, you talked about going back to the previous point. How did you find out about that stuff in terms of structuring your week? Obviously, thinking about loading, that sort of thing. You've sort of gone in there. Even then, the things are a lot different, I imagine, in terms of in terms of accessing information like that readily. You've gone in, you're sort of straight into the deep end, didn't you?
Yeah, very much so. Obviously, there was a program in place that that I walked into that the people that were there in my role previously had left behind, and some of that was literally what days do the boys have their education and their their study sessions around the education that they do as part of their scholarship. So obviously we have to fit in around that. That was probably the first thing that I had to do, really make sure that we you had to prioritise that to an extent, because you had an outside source coming in to deliver those to the boys. So we needed to make sure that we fitted in around that. But what I was really, like I said, going back to what I was just saying there, but what I was really keen to do was give the boys the opportunity to develop and practice themselves. I felt that when I watched Alex's sessions, when he had the opportunity to take boys out in the afternoon, there was that, working in small groups, in twos, in threes, in units, if you like. But what he allowed the boys to do a lot was go out and practice individually, to go out and rehearse their techniques, to go out and express the different areas of their game that they needed to do themselves. And then he was there to assist them with that. But it wasn't coach-led. It wasn't necessarily Alex ramming down the throat of, no, this is how you strike the ball with your left foot, or this is how you curl it with the inside of your right foot. He was there as a support, but the boys had a real opportunity to go and get out there and have 20, 30, 40 opportunities at striking the ball at the goal, or bending a free kick, or taking a corner, or working on their crossing, or practicing their heading. And I felt that was a real big thing that I hadn't really seen a great deal of before. But Alex had given those boys that real opportunity to have that time on their own. And I suppose that fits in with that philosophy that I'd left behind at Tottenham, of that individual, about making sure that we give the individual the best opportunity that we can to become the best player that they can. So that was something that I put in pretty quickly, and we sort of set up clinics, if you like, in the mornings when we could, and in the afternoons when we had the opportunity to have lunch and go back out again. To go and give those boys that structure throughout the week on the outside. Very low key in terms of the way that we worked, so there wasn't a massive amount of physical coming out of those particular sessions. We tried to limit the opportunities that they had to do it in terms of the amount that they did, so that would put a little bit of pressure on the techniques that they were working. so that they were rehearsing under a little bit of pressure, but albeit in their own environment, in their own way on a lot of occasions. And myself and the other coaches that were around just dipped our toe to try to ease them along and help them along and shape the certain techniques and areas of their game that they were working on.
So I mean, obviously, look, you've worked in some amazing environments, and you talked about the importance of working away from the game. I mean, what's your thoughts on all this? The messages you're hearing particularly from some people about that working away from the game is a waste of time. It doesn't transfer to the game. I mean, obviously, you're fortunate enough to work in elite football, worked in some of the top academies, and where you see it. So, it's such an integral part, and even at the top level. And what would your thoughts on that be?
I personally feel that having people away from practicing away from the game. So I lost the phrase that you used there, but that I just think it creates so much more expression, so much more individuality, if you like, to the way that people work. I still get my people of vast experience, older people than me, tell me kids don't play football in the street no more and don't do this and don't do that. What it was like in the good old days. But I suppose what we have lost off the back of those, that history that people have had in this country is what we've lost is the understanding of how to practice, of how to go and express yourself on your own, how to go and kick the ball against the wall, if you like, or try and clip it to hit the crossbar on your own, whatever the little particular individual areas of games kids go and do. So I think it's massive. I think they get an understanding of how to master the ball by themselves, rather than being reliant on somebody else all the time. Talk about decision makers. There's so much time spent by us as coaches, and I'm sure I've been guilty of it myself, of feeding players with information because you think that's going to help them get better and it's going to help develop them and move them forward. But I think sometimes them being able to do that on their own and have that ability to go and practice in a certain way or strike a ball over a certain distance, whatever it is that they might be trying to master at that particular time. I think them being able to do it alone and stand alone or alongside a friend that's practicing a similar sort of thing, I think that there's huge value in that. It doesn't always have to look like a game of football, does it? I'm sure you know as well as anybody that phrase was used at Spurs all the time, that it doesn't have to look like a coaching session. It doesn't have to look perfect. It doesn't have to be that there's a line of white cones over there and a line of red ones and everybody's got the right colour bib on. It doesn't have to be set in that way. It's about trying to give individuals the opportunity to go and develop themselves alongside the structure and everything else that comes with being in organised coaching sessions.
Interesting. So then, obviously, let's move along because I want to try and cover as much as possible with you, mate. So I remember then going back to Tottenham, to their fancy new training ground when I was at Chelsea, and bumping into you, and then you telling me that about your new role. That was when you were working with Norwich. So just tell us a little bit about that role, how that came about.
I'll be brutally honest. I was out of work. Things had changed at AFC Bournemouth, and there was a bit of tug of war going on at the top of the club in terms of a bit of power and takeover and money and all those sorts of things. So I sort of fell victim as part of that, and I sort of had to move away from that. So an opportunity came up to go and work at Norwich in recruitment. So my role was to manage or oversee the recruitment in the southeast, if you like. So we had a series of development centres in different areas. This time the development centre, not like it was at Spurs where I was working with the younger age groups. This was more 12s to 16s, kids of an age that were capable of travelling from the areas where we were running those centres into Norwich. So prioritising the 12s to 16s. Then throughout the weekends I would spend a lot of time going around clubs, watching games, watching different age groups, watching particular players. That was all with a view of sort of building up a database, if you like, and a library and a knowledge and an understanding of players that were out there, so that if players were leaving other clubs, we would have an understanding of what they were like. We would have seen them, and we'd have a knowledge of whether they were capable of coming to Norwich. And then the flip side of that, there was always a pot of money, if you like, with them becoming a Category 1 academy, for them to go out and and buy players and bring players in at a certain level. So it was a real mixture. What the biggest thing that I took from it now, looking back, is that I had the opportunity to go around to a lot of clubs of a different level, different scale, all going through the first real phase of EPPP audits, and a bit of that jostling for position as to who was going to become a Cat 1 and a Cat 2 and a Cat 3, and how that was going to change each club. That was really interesting to be able to see that. It was really good to be able to get an idea and start to value again, I suppose, other philosophies after what I'd experienced and what I'd learnt at Tottenham, to see how other clubs did things, how people approach games of football. That was really interesting now when I look back to see how those different clubs worked, and how clubs that were perceived as smaller Category 2, Category 3 clubs, how they went about their business and tried to compete with some of the bigger and stronger academies. So that was a real really valuable experience off the back of that. Personally, I had a bit of an issue with the fact that I was seen as a scout rather than a coach.
I was going to say that you keep searching for this coaching role, don't you?
Yeah, it hurt me, and I found it really tough to watch football for a while. In terms of, I was watching games as a coach and trying to identify, why weren't this player doing this, or why was he in this particular area. And really, that wasn't my job. My job was to watch and identify the best players and pick out their strengths and weaknesses and work out whether or not they were, try to get an understanding of what level we felt they were capable of going and playing. But I'd say that was a real misunderstanding of, I suppose, what my job was about to begin with. I found it really tough. I didn't want to be seen as a scout. I didn't want to be that person that walks through the door and everybody's watching me, waiting for me to go and try and tap up someone else or try and get somebody's ear. I didn't want to be perceived at that, and I wasn't capable of being that. But being a scout, I think that sometimes the image that goes with being, in an area of recruitment, that people do look at you with a bit of a shady look at times, and I was quite uncomfortable with that. It didn't last particularly long. I was there just over a year, and Norwich went down that season. So I was on the move again, and I was made redundant. So it was, like I say, an experience. Now I'm out of it, and I've done it. An experience that I look back on that I can take things out of it that I felt was really, of real benefit to me individually. But it was a role that at the time I found very, very difficult.
That was going to be my next question. I remember John McDermott saying to me once, "Don't be seduced by the world of football. The only one guarantee is that sooner or later you're going to lose your job, whether you're a player or you're a coach." So, you got a family, you've got a young family. Obviously, you moved them up from Bournemouth then back to London. I mean, how difficult was that for you? And obviously, as that level, having to deal with that and then go and to find some new work in that same industry.
Well, hugely, it was a real test. First of all, financially, the cost that comes with with moving house and then having to move again is it can be crippling at times. So that was really tough. It was difficult. The fact that my little girl was just about to start school and we were getting all of that organised down in Bournemouth, and then that was sort of all thrown up in the air, and we had to. Fortunately, we moved back to an area that we knew, and I was able to commute to Norwich. So that wasn't too much of an upheaval, but what it did do is it puts huge pressure on you to understand where your next role, where your next job's coming from. So it was a real tough period for all of us as a family, and all of all the people that were around me to try to get over that. And like I say, I loved the job down at Bournemouth, and I loved the area that we lived in, so it was even harder to be able to move away from that. But because of the way that football is, because of the way that the industry is, you have to get over it. You have to find a way of recovering from it. There's not always a huge amount of opportunities and jobs out there that are available to you. So that was also a concern as to where the next one was going to come from. Like I say, it was tough, but I think certainly a period that I look back on it definitely makes you stronger once you have to try to deal with that situation and try and come out of it the other side.
So, and then so obviously, look, you've gone back to Spurs. We're going to skip that one because I want to concentrate on Swindon for a bit.
Of course.
And because finally you've got this, you got your coaching role, your full-time coaching role that you want. Tell us a little bit about that, how that came about and that experience.
Yeah, I suppose like it's something that I always wanted to do. I would hope that I would do, but don't think I ever really thought it was a reality. I don't think I ever really imagined that I was going to get that opportunity to go and work as a first team coach at the time at such a big club in League One. Sometimes people sit there and say it too, and a lot of the time situations in any walk of life are. And I was fortunate enough that I'd built up a very good relationship with Martin Ling when he was manager of Leyton Orient, and always stayed in touch with him. And he'd had some tough times in terms of some of the experiences that he'd had once he'd had to leave Torquay for mental health issues. But we always stayed sort of fairly close. And he'd actually come to Spurs to do some work in one of the colleges that I was working in. So worked quite closely as coaches and that sort of thing. And sort of, like I say, we were already very close already. And he got the opportunity as being an ex-Swindon player to get back into management. And he went in there as the manager. I was very fortunate that the guy who was the assistant there at the time, under Martin, had somebody that I'd played with as a kid, had become very good friends with, went to the same school. So the relationship between the three of us was quite well merged already, albeit in quite unusual circumstances. That Martin had gone in above him, Luke was in the middle, and then there was me as the third member of staff. I've sort of touched on it a couple of times already and said that my previous roles had been daunting, but I remember my first day, and it was all like real big whirlwind of, wow, I can't believe I've been given this opportunity to come in and do this job. To actually getting up in the morning at 5 o'clock or whatever it was to drive into Swindon, turning up at training on my first day and thinking, oh my God, wow, this is massive in terms of my coaching is going to be really tested now. These are full-time players, some players that have been at incredible clubs, players that have not so long before I joined had been in the playoff final. All of those sort of things start to go through your head, and you start to think, wow, this is the level that I'm going to have to focus on. I'm going to have to be at this every single minute of every day. I can't afford to take the foot off the pedal once, because these people are going to find me out if my standards are not of the highest level. So it was quite daunting. I remember standing there on the training pitch watching the first session and thinking, wow, we're bottom of the league. We're bottom of the league, and I've walked into this first opportunity. So there's loads of different things that were going through my mind at the time.
Tell us about your first session then. But you put on what was the first session you put on for the boys there?
The first session, the first 2 days were sessions that were already being done. Martin and Luke had been working there a week or so before I had, because I had to work my notice period. So it was more a case of just me getting used to who was who, what names were who played where. I had a rough idea because I'd been to watch them a number of times before I went in, but getting a real understanding of who everybody was and how they worked, and the type of personalities were in there. The squad had gone through a lot of change from the season before, so there was a number of characters that were not involved in the team at the time, and that was my first session. So we'd had a couple of days, we had our first game, and then we trained on the Monday morning, and I remember coming in and Martin saying to me, can you take this group of 8 players or whatever it was, and it was everybody that had been left out of the team from the weekend, so everybody's chins were on the floor.
You've got a tough crowd already.
And I remember thinking, wow, is this what it's going to be like every day? But I think what I quickly learned was that it doesn't change. Your coaching, of course, your expectations and your standards of working with first team players are probably a little bit different to what they would have been if you were working with the college boys that I just left behind, or the Tottenham under 8s. But the actual way, the way that you coach is you. It's your identity. It's about what you're about. You don't try to change to be somebody else, because I think that becomes something that's very, very dangerous if you try to be something that you're not. And then the sessions that you put on are, for me, it's what you believe in. It's what it's how you coach. It's obviously that's to fit in with what the manager wants when you're at that level, and how the rest of the club's working. But the way that you deliver and the sessions that you deliver at the time are, I don't think they particularly change whoever or whatever you're working with. And
so what was your first session? Do you remember it? With those 8 players, what did you put on?
I remember putting a very basic passing drill on just to get them started. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I've gone a little bit underneath the level here. But I remember them watching and seeing that players at that level still had the same deficiencies that that players would have had when I was working with any of the groups that I would have worked with in the past, in terms of people's particular body shape to receive the ball might have been different, the way that they move or check to come to get on the ball, little fine details that I thought, hold on a minute, I can still pick out the same things here when I'm coaching, or what I'm asking for, or if I want to evolve and move the session on, I can, I still probably need to focus on the same things that I would have worked on with most of the other groups. So kept it very, very simple. I was probably very, very safe on my first experience.
I'm just interested as well, because say for instance, you're working with young academy players, you're trying to get into them, you're trying to motivate them, you're trying to get that intensity. I mean, obviously a completely different environment working with pros. In some of, for instance, some of them sacking it off or something like that. I mean, how do you deal with that? It's a very different sort of environment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think some of it is them. Certainly on my first day or first session, it was sort of people testing to find out what I was about. So I think it was still the same. So go in, be energetic, be enthusiastic. Don't try and overcomplicate things. I think I certainly needed to ease my way in to make sure that I earned my credibility and showed people that. That I knew what I was talking about, or that my sessions were worthy of me working at that level. So I think the ultimate thing was that I didn't have to change my principles. I didn't have to change the way that I wanted to work. I was still enthusiastic. I was still energetic, passionate, and then you'd like to think that over that period of time of working with those players every day, that they start to see that you care and you try to work with them, and you're going to try and improve them, whether they're in the team or not.
And then
I think that's the big thing with those types of players is you're in and out, and their livelihoods are at stake, especially at the latter end of the season and that sort of thing. Certainly once we got safe, it was I wanted those players to know that. Exactly the same way that we did with any of the younger players that worked with previously. I was there to help them and to try to get them, make them better. That was ultimately going to make our team better and make us more successful, but would give them the opportunity to prolong their career or give them a further opportunity, whether it was with us or somebody else.
And then tell us a bit about the the game day pressures. You're in the dugout, you've got big crowds. You work you're under a bit of pressure. Probably football fans aren't backwards and coming forward, as they say. What was that sort of like being in that environment?
Tough, very tough, and still find it tough now. It was Swindon was a big club, and it's no secret to a lot of people that it's a club that there's a lot of unrest within that. The supporters at Swindon were having a tough time in terms of there was a lot of clashes with the hierarchy at the club. So there was times, especially at the beginning, because we were down the bottom, but we had a good run to start with that took us sort of out and away from the danger zone quite quickly. So it was a little bit upbeat for a while, but we were never quite at the top end and pushing for probably promotion and the expectation that the club wanted, alongside the fact that there was a little bit of animosity between the ownership and the fans, always meant that there was a little bit of unrest. So that was very, very tough and hard to deal with, because ultimately supporters will voice their frustrations and their disappointments at the team and the performance and that sort of thing. So that was very difficult to get your head around. There'd be games where you come out and think we've performed well, or we've delivered a performance that was of the level or the type that we'd worked on throughout the week, but yet at the same time we didn't quite get the win, and supporters would voice their disappointment at that. So that was very, very tough to learn and to deal with. The other side of it that I found really difficult was that my family were very supportive of me and would be at most of our, especially our home games. And that was also very tough to know that when you're getting a little bit of stick, well, look, you can take that on the chin. It's part of the territory. It's the environment that you're in. But also at the same time, you've got to look up in the stand and know that your wife and kids and mum and dad are having to listen to the same bit of grief. So that was something that I had to get my head around quite quickly. I'm still not a huge fan now of match days. When you get up and that horrible sort of first feeling when you open your eyes in the morning of thinking, oh God, I've got a few hours to wait till kick-off. It's all that preparation, all that nervous energy before the game. The actual games are not the end of the world because you're in it and you're amongst it and it's happening and you're constantly thinking and you're constantly occupied. It's the bit beforehand that I find very, very, very tough to deal with. It's an unusual feeling because, like yourself and a lot of coaches that would be listening, you've spent so many years prioritising performance. Still do that now. You spend a lot of time focused on players and making sure that they develop and execute performance and are constantly developing, improving. That still happens now. But all of a sudden you find yourself in an environment where, and by the way, you've got to try and win every week as well. Otherwise people are going to be unhappy or your job will be on the line. That's obviously a huge pressure to have to deal with.
And so, I'm interested, look, you talked a bit earlier when you were about Bournemouth, about structuring your week. How does it work then? Now you're at first team level, you play a game on Saturday, obviously it goes well or it doesn't go well. What's the planning preparation look for that week in terms of, building up to the next games?
It was funny, at Swindon we were very limited on our facilities. We didn't have our own training ground. So we used to have to change at the stadium, travel to train and then travel back, eat. So then therefore meant that we could never really do any additional work. We could never go out and do, an afternoon session, or we could never go out and say to a couple of individuals, no, just stay behind for a little while. Because we were like hiring a facility. It was, very limited in terms of being able to get access to be able to go and continuously work with the players. What we've got at Orient now is we've got a real good structure. First and foremost, the manager, Justin Edinburgh, has got a way of working where he doesn't want us to change too much. We stick to a plan. We've got, when I say a series of sessions, obviously that changes. You don't want training to ever be the same for players, but we've got a structure in the way that we work throughout the week where the team sessions are set up throughout the week, that we ease ourselves on a Monday. It's like, get everybody started again in terms of the way that we train on a Monday morning. They're quite light. We train quite tough on a Tuesday, but every Tuesday morning, both myself and the first team coach, we take out between us probably 13, 14 players. We've got a squad of 24 here, and about 14 players come out. And we work on whether it be individual techniques, whether it be group work. We might have a group for heading, we might have a group for ball striking, we might have a group for finishing, a group for crossing. Obviously it depends on the personnel and the people that come out. What we try to have on that is they get an opportunity to practice, like we were saying earlier, that opportunity to home in on their techniques, like I say, either with one of us or on their own, where they're working on particular elements of their game. And then what we also try to do on a Tuesday is make that competitive sometimes, whether it be a winger against a fullback. So we're working on 1v1 work as the attacker and a 1v1 defending in a wide area as a fullback, whether it be a forward trying to work up against a centre half, pinning a centre half, receiving skills, facing people up, those sorts of things. And then at the same time, you obviously get that opportunity to work with the defenders. So again, a real variety, and we can do that on a Tuesday because it's obviously quite a long way between having recovered from the game on the Saturday and then getting ready for the weekend's game. So we do that, and then obviously the boys come back out later on in the morning to do their group session and to train together as a team. Wednesday's pretty much our tactical day, if you like. We'll work on us, whether we work on the opposition, whether we work on attacking, defending. Obviously the theme will change throughout the week. It will be dependent on the previous performance and then obviously the opposition that we're coming up against at the weekend. So that Wednesday tends to be our real day where we focus on what's going to happen at the weekend. Thursday, we have Thursdays off, and the reason behind that is that we feel that by having Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in, we can make the Tuesdays and Wednesdays very much more intense before they have that full day off on a Thursday. What that also does let us do is if we ever have a midweek game, a Tuesday night game, which we have a lot of specifically at the first part of the season in this league, on the Wednesday morning. It gives you the opportunity to come in, analyse games, look at where we went right, where we went wrong, what we need to change, how we need to address it, and then be able to do a session with the boys that haven't played. So it helps us to maintain the fitness levels a lot better than it would do if we did it on a Thursday, because it's so much closer to a game. And then when we come in on a Friday, it's more about us just trying to take the pressure off the players, really. It's more of a lighter session, basic little possession drills and an opportunity for the boys to get on the balls, and then they play a series of small-sided games and try and that the intensity for that, but albeit over a short period. And then what we also do on a Friday morning is we have the same personnel that work on a Tuesday. They come out and they do all their unopposed work. They get a real opportunity to, if they want to do their finishing, it's a little bit more, I suppose, light-hearted, a little bit more low intensity, very little confrontation in terms of 1v1s or anything like that. A lot of it is them on their own or them in pairs. Try and create some competition where it might be defenders working on their heading, for argument's sake, and try and put it into a little bit of competition where it's light-hearted, but they're still getting that opportunity to practice and execute their skills. And then it's obviously on to Saturday for the game.
Wow. So, I mean, you mentioned there, so you're back at Orient. I mean, This is your club, so amazing opportunity there, and you've gone in there as assistant manager. I mean, what's that like now, being there back at, you've done a full circle there now, and you're working there with the first team?
Yeah, incredible, amazing that the opportunity came around. That I lost my job at Swindon, we got relegated, we really struggled, and I found myself out of work again. But there was a new consortium that took over the club. The club had been put through a real turmoil, sad times in terms of the way that the club had been run under the previous regime. The club had gone through double relegations, found themselves in the National League. A new consortium take over. Actually an Orient fan, so having been spent so much time at this club, both with a season ticket as a kid and that sort of thing, and then the amount of time I spent here playing and working, it was a lot of people that I could familiarise with. Martin Ling had gone back as director of football, so a lot of people that I'd worked with previously in the past, and people that had we all had a common theme of our love and our desire for Leyton Orient to do well. So it was a bit surreal to begin with. I took the first week of pre-season on my own last year and had a 3-game period as caretaker manager, which was hugely eye-opening for me. But in terms of being able to work back in that environment again, what it did for me really is working with a good manager like Justin Edinburgh. It gives me real opportunity to go and coach how I want to coach, and obviously I work how he wants me to work in terms of what we deliver and how he wants the team to play. But in terms of how I structure how the training looks, how people work, when they work, the types of things that we work on with them individually and in their units, on top of everything that we do as a group, it's been a dream to work back at the club in the role that I am, but at the same time to work for a manager who gives me so much freedom to go and put together a way of working to continuously try to develop players whilst trying to make sure that we're winning games is really, really interesting, and it's something I'm really enjoying at the moment.
And I mean, we chatted previously a bit earlier before you came on air here. Tell us a little bit about the realities of playing at that level of football. Obviously, they dropped out of the league. I mean, obviously, you've now, because obviously you worked with League One with Swindon. I mean, what are the harsh realities of work at of football at working in like that level?
Well, I think we all have our idealistic way of how we think the game should be played, or what we like watching. And the types of players and the types of teams you go to teams, if you like, when you're observing football. And the reality of the football in this league isn't like that. It's not like it's not like going and watching Man City or Barcelona. There's a lot of rough and tumble. It's
crash bang wallop some of the time.
Crash bang wallop at times. It's the physical element in the game from a lot of teams is the first and foremost thing that stands out, and you have to notice. So you have to put a team together and a group of players together, which we've been really fortunate of doing, that are capable of dealing with that, are capable of going toe to toe with that style of football and that approach, that that aggressive nature of trying to make the game into a war rather than anything else. You have to be able to deal with that, rightly or wrongly, whatever you think of the way football can be played. You have to come to terms with that. We have to be capable of putting a group of players on a pitch that are physically able to match what the opposition are trying to throw at us, and what they're trying to do. And then on top of that, then we really try to make sure that we can dominate the ball and play an exciting brand of football and high tempo. Like I say, attacking brand in a way that we try to go about winning our games. And fortunately for us this season, we managed to keep everybody pretty much fit throughout pre-season. We had a fantastic pre-season. Boys worked really, really hard. We had a real good games program, real realistic games program to what we were about to go into with the league, and we managed to get off to a comfortable start, and then we really imposed ourselves. What's very interesting for me is that a lot of our home games are teams that come and sit and put men behind the ball and wait for us to break them down. So there's often an opportunity where there's 21 players in one half of the pitch one team trying to stop or not lose, and the other team trying to win. And I don't mean that from a negative perspective. At any level, if you go away from home to a big club in an impressive stadium with good players, you would go there and try to make it tough for the opposition. And we experienced that a hell of a lot. So from a coach's perspective, and from us as a management team, we have to find ways of breaking that down, and it makes it very, very interesting. It's made it even more interesting this year that we've managed to be able to do it and won more games than we've lost.
Well, I suppose I was going to say as well, there's one of the key tactical themes from the World Cup, wasn't it? That dealing with the low block. So, I mean, as a coach then, I mean, what do you do then? You've got this recurring problem. What's your CPD, or what do you do? So, you need to come up with ideas to try and support the players into solving this problem. Where do you get your sessions from?
Watching. I think watching us first of all, and then how do I set us up to make sure that we go out and deliver a performance that fits with what the manager wants, and what we've decided is the way of us playing. But then at the same time, for it to not be predictable in the way that other teams come and stop it. My CPD, if I'm brutally honest, Saul, is quite limited because of the amount of time that I spend at work every day. And the time off that I get corresponds most of the time with everybody else being off. So actually going to a session or watching a session somewhere else is very, very difficult. So I do a lot of that by watching games at the top, because whatever way you look at it, whatever football we come up and we're playing in at the weekend, if you're looking at what the very best players and very best teams are doing, I mean, you've always got a good opportunity of trying to replicate that in some way, shape or form in order to try and gain some success. We've got very good wingers in our team. We've got a number of players with pace and the ability to dribble with the ball. So it's really important that we try to create a style and a system that allows us to get those really important players that in our team on the ball. We've probably not got the stereotypical big front man that the league suggests is the way to go. So we try to break teams up and break teams down and like I say, get our clever, bright, wide players in the game to create ourselves opportunities. So I suppose it's trying to find teams, ideas, sessions that fit in with what we've got there, and not just put on a session that looks like a good session, but something that's going to be of benefit to the team and the players and get us a result weekend.
Interesting. And what about yourself personally? What's your ultimate ambitions in the game? You've literally gone through. You must have done every single job in the football world, really.
I haven't been a club secretary yet, but
I mean, so there's only one role standing. Maybe the tough, the one at the top, the manager's job. Is that one thing you'd like to do in the future?
No, I've never. It's never been something that I've set out to do. I'll be honest. I've probably never set out to do any of my jobs. They all evolve and come around in various different ways. Being a manager's never been something that I've sat there and thought that I really wanted to do. I had the opportunity to do it for 3 games last year when the manager got the sack and before Justin arrived, and I enjoyed. I loved the fact that I was responsible for organising the day, and this is when we're going to do our video analysis session. This is how I'm going to set the team up. This is the type of sessions that I want. I hated being the manager on a match day. Really didn't enjoy that. So right now, that's not something that I would sit here and say that I really want to set out to achieve. I feel that being an assistant manager or a first team coach, certainly in the way that I'm working with the manager that I'm working with at the moment, is something that I really enjoy. I think that's something that I've got a strength in, something that, like I say, I think I can enjoy my job every day, but I can also be of benefit to the people that I'm working with. Got a real passion because of where I've come from and the coaching that I've done throughout my career. Got a real passion of developing players, and I think certainly when I look at some of the players that we've got with us right now, some of the players that I worked with at Swindon and the young players that I've worked with there, I feel that I've got a real strength to continue to develop young or aspiring players to make them better and fit that into the way that we work to try to win games at the weekend. So I would, like everybody, I'm ambitious and I want to work at the very best level that I can. What that is and how I get there, I haven't got that particularly planned out in my mind. But like I say, I feel that I'm in a role at the moment where I've got a strength that I think I can continuously home in on, and don't need to look any further above that in terms of trying to become a manager.
And it's got to be getting Orient back getting up to the Premier League, right? That's got to be the ambition.
To the Premier League would be incredible, wouldn't it? Can you imagine that? But no, I think the biggest thing for us is where the club's been, what the club's been through. It's about us getting this club out of the National League and back in the Football League. People keep saying to me it's where we belong. No, you only belong where you end up, and the club's gone through turmoil and ended up here. We've got ourselves into a very, very good position this year in terms of being top as we go into the new year. There's a lot of competition in the league. There's real financial backing at some of the other clubs that's going to make it tough for us to get over the line. But if you'd have said to us at the start of the season we were going to find ourselves top of the league at the beginning of January, we would have bitten your hands off. We've got a real good opportunity to try and get up now, so we need to that's got to be our biggest focus, and ultimately that's my biggest focus at the moment. What happens to my career after that, we'll see where we go, but right now it'll be about trying to get Leyton Orient back in the league.
Ross, thanks for your time. It's been fantastic. Sorry mate, we've gone a little bit over, but it's been really, really good.
No, thank you very much, Saul. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for tuning in to the MyPersonalFootballCoach.com Soccer Player Development Podcast. MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Dynamic Ball Mastery Program is the world's leading online individual technical training program, proven and developed at the highest level in the English Premier League. Sign up now to train like the pros and take your game to the next level. Master the ball, master the game.